Welcome to the Matthew Moran podcast. Here you will find a series of in-depth conversations with the world's best nature photographers, conservationists, designers, editors, writers, and publishers. You will get an insight into the lives of creative professionals and industry experts, and it is a chance to hear their stories, personal journeys, and how they carve a niche to make a living in a rapidly changing, highly competitive, but hugely exciting field. I've had the pleasure of working with many of my guests over the years, and have learned so much from spending time with them and having conversations about what it means to be a creative freelancer, sourcing exciting projects, sharing skills through partnerships, and not losing sight of your goals and dreams. This podcast is my chance to share these conversations with you. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Today my guest is Roxy Furman. She is a wildlife biologist, filmmaker, presenter, and activist who at the age of 23 hit the ground running after graduating with a first-class honours degree in zoology. She has a significant following on Instagram, and Roxy uses social media to great effect, educating and connecting with people about everything from her experiences about going vegan to getting involved in demonstrations and speaking about environmental issues. And I assure you, she does this in a very warm, unpreachy and compassionate way. She is also the founder and owner of her own online business, the Zephyr Eco Market, where she sells a range of eco-friendly and sustainable products. So you can check out the links on her page in the podcast section of my website to find out more about this. Roxy is now embarking on a master's degree in filmmaking at the University of West England, so I encourage you to keep up to date with what she's doing now, as we'll no doubt start seeing some captivating content and powerful storytelling centered around conservation and the need to protect our planet. Roxy and I caught up in my garden studio in North London to talk about so many different topics, and I hope you get as inspired as I was listening to her speak. The 1 hour format never feels like enough, but hopefully we'll get her back soon. Until then, enjoy this one. Roxy, welcome along. We are back in Tottenham. My last two podcasts have been very luxurious. Done one in Sweden and one in Vietnam. But we're back in North London. The sun is shining. It's a beautiful June evening, and I'm really excited that you've come to visit. And we spent some time together already talking, and I'm always a bit I don't want to talk about stuff too much before we actually have this conversation, so you feel like you're repeating yourself, but we've got loads to talk about. And you were down here a little bit earlier getting your third tattoo, is that right, in London?
My fourth.
Your
yeah,
fourth.
But I went with my mum. It's her first ever tattoo.
That's
so
cool.
It's kind of weird being the one holding your mum's hand.
Yeah, it should be the other way around, right?
Yeah.
That's great. Actually, I didn't ask you this. What did your mum get tattooed?
We got matching, so we both got a himsa.
Okay.
So it's Sanskrit, and it means non-harming to all sentient beings.
Very cool, very cool. So yeah, we will end up talking a lot about this and your belief system and your love of wildlife, your love of animals. That's why you're here. And you know, when I was doing some research on you and looking at your great videos on YouTube and all the posts that you do on Instagram, you're really active and stories, etc. It's quite clear from the beginning that you really enjoy doing lots and lots of different things. But going a little bit further back and just starting off with, what got you interested in the natural world, what got you interested in animals wanting to protect, what got you interested in the environment. Can you remember back, when you were first kind of hooked on that?
I think a lot of it is kind of what I've been told or heard from my parents. Stuff like mum telling me when I was at nursery, and they'd go around and saying, what's your favourite animal to all the kids? And they'd answer cat, dog, rabbit, and I'd get to me and I'd say hippopotamus. Long word for this little 2.5-year-old at nursery. That was always, animals were always kind of my thing. And I was saying to you in the car when we got back from the event that, my dad wanted to work with animals, and his parents weren't supportive of that and pushed him to be a lawyer. And I don't think he necessarily, it wasn't like, I didn't work with animals, so you're going to. It was just that I think that passion kind of came off on the spread, like through the way we lived. Like he had this animal encyclopedia that I'd always look through and like open a random page and be like, what's that animal? They're just things that we used to do together that probably kind of shaped my interest in it, but it was never directly forced. Like my sister's not into animals and wildlife. It wasn't kind of put on me. It was always what I loved, but supported by my parents.
And it's nice as well because you can, you know, now, you know, I'm a parent of a 16-month-old, and you know, you have to be very conscious not to project, you know, particularly as your dad had this love of animals and whatever, could have been a vet, could have been a conservationist, but it's like, no, you've got to get a proper job, you've got to be a doctor or a lawyer, and he did that. But it's nice that you've grown up in an environment where it's fostered rather than pushed.
Yeah. And all of our kind of family holidays, like we were really fortunate to be able to go on holidays to all these amazing places when we were growing up.
Where did you go?
We did Borneo, Costa Rica, just crazy family holidays that, you know, most people never get to experience.
Sure.
And it was always kind of, where can we go to see animals? And when I was about 6, we went to Seychelles and went to Bird Island, which does a lot of conservation work with seabirds and turtles. And one day we went down to the beach to kind of help release turtle hatchlings back into the sea. And there was a conservationist working on an island called Robbie. And he said, you know, everyone wait here. I'm going to go to the nest and collect the turtles, and I'll bring them back and we'll all release them together. And little 6-year-old me takes off my shoes and runs after him. He just picks me up and takes me with him. And when I got back, that's kind of the first moment where I kind of knew that term and said, I want to be a conservationist. So kind of having that almost field experience when you're 6 and like seeing it for your eyes, that's kind of what really then pushed me to follow that route.
And for me, it's extra amazing because one of my guests, Josh, who's my good friend, is a conservationist, and he's the same age as me. He's 42, and in his interview, he talked about when he was younger, not even knowing what the word conservation meant, and that's how much things have changed in this time. And so, when you were 6, what year was this? I mean, we might give away your age here. I hope you don't mind.
I don't even know. 2019 now. I'm turning 24 this year.
Right. Oh God! Now you put me on the spot. Now you put me on the spot to do the math. So that would have been 18 years ago. So yeah, just 2001. You knew then that you wanted to be a conservationist. So fast forward, because there's so much stuff I want to talk about, like current, and it's really good to keep these podcasts current. But it's really interesting that you do all these different things, making films. I know I've just found out that you're also writing quite regularly. So what was it that spurred you on to do a zoology degree rather than, biology or geography or something? Because zoology is quite specialised, it's quite specific.
It was weird because I was at kind of this confusing point in my life when it was choosing a degree and deciding what I wanted to do at university, because animals were my thing and that's what I love, but I've also danced since I was 3 years old.
Right.
And performing arts has been a massive part of my life, so it's kind of the first time where I was choosing between the two things that I loved doing. So it was kind of like, what do I do? How do I merge these things together? So kind of from going to university, I was thinking, if I have a degree in zoology, I have that scientific background, that backing to what I want to do, and then later on I can kind of bring back in my other love, which is the performing side of things, and merge the two together in more a presenting way. And
right. And so how would you go about merging dance and zoology?
I mean, those two probably will never merge so much. But even that kind of stuff, it's using my body in ways, and like the kind of training I do now is very much like movements of how you do if you are using your body like we should be using our body, and kind of that all these things are kind of more interlinked than I originally thought. And especially now as I'm getting older and realizing we've had this massive disconnect from the natural world and how we're supposed to walk, how we're supposed to sit, how we're supposed to use our bodies, and I think it's just you learn so many other skills as well from performing arts, not just like movement, and like it's just connecting to people on a really like a physical level, but in not like in a weird sense, but you learning to be close to people and read people's body language, and then you can apply that to reading animals' body language. Like all these things have so many links.
So you graduated just last year?
Yeah, pretty much this time.
And you hit the ground running. You said earlier that you picked up this job, and was it 3 days afterwards? Tell us a little bit about that.
So I finished this time last year. I was in California.
Right.
So I'd finished my final exams, but I hadn't graduated yet.
Right.
So I went with my family and we did
You didn't hesitate?
No, literally did a month trip around California, again, seeing as much animal as you possibly could.
Yeah.
And I remember during that month I was stressing, like, I'm applying to jobs and I'm not getting anything. And my mum was like, you haven't even graduated yet and you're already stressing. Then got back, I think it was end of July when my graduation ceremony was. And yeah, then ended up moving to Scotland 3 days later to go and live on the Isle of Seal, which is just off the coast near Oban.
Right.
West Coast, working as a wildlife biologist and presenter on a boat there.
Amazing.
How have I gone from stressing out in LA, where I should be having the time of my life,
getting your dream job?
Yeah.
And so was it a tour company? Was it, you talked about working as a wildlife biologist, so were you doing science work as well?
Yeah, it was a tour company, so kind of small. I think it was maximum of 12 passengers on the boat. Right. Around the Firth of Lorne area. So It was spotting wildlife, talking about what we saw.
What did you see?
We saw minke whales, common dolphins, bottlenose dolphins, otters, seals, sea eagles, golden eagles.
Unbelievable.
Like, it was
and this
incredible.
Is the UK, you know. I mean, I know Scotland is different to the rest. It is that a bit more wild, but you know, and you list all those mammal species off. I think sometimes people forget that, you know, if you want to go whale watching, you need to go to Vancouver Island or go to New Zealand. But were you seeing this stuff regularly?
Yeah, not so much the whales. They were kind of like getting further out, and often people would be on the boat and we wouldn't be able to get further out because it was a lot bumpier than people were expecting. We went round the Corryvreckan whirlpool, which I think is the 3rd largest whirlpool in the world. So it's quite a rough boat trip, so you don't always get out to where you'd see the whales. Get some
seasick passengers.
Yeah.
I would have been.
But yeah, that was my first time kind of up in Scotland, and really furthered my appreciation for what we have here on our doorstep, and why are we all not doing this on a more regular basis?
It's a common thread through, you know, I've spoken with Pete Cairns on this podcast, and so many other photographers that have done lots of traveling and, you know, been to exotic locations, but find themselves, you know, that includes me, doing stuff right on your doorstep because it's accessible, and you know, we don't need to spend thousands of pounds, dollars going to, you know, flying to these other locations to see wildlife that we actually also have here. And so how long did that job last?
So a few weeks into that job, I actually had surgery. Surgery on both toes from dance for years.
Wow.
And I'm very much I hate resting. I'm not good at resting. I'm very much like, I want to be doing stuff all the time. So 2 weeks after the surgery, I was back on the boat, which wasn't probably the best idea, having foot surgery working around on a boat with wet feet all day. So my feet got infected, but I was trying to ignore it and just thinking, it's going to go away. I'm living on an island. There's not a lot I can do anyway. Still trying to go to work. So I had that, and then also had a bad experience with my boss, which is kind of something else I wanted to touch on, the fact that I'd left uni and, you know, thought, oh my gosh, I've got this dream job that I've wanted my whole life. I'm living on an island where I can kayak after work and like have all this wildlife right on my doorstep. I literally thought, this is what I wanted. This is what I need. Yeah. So when this situation happened with my boss, and you know, it was he was the only one running the business, and it was me and one other girl working for him. There was no one I could have gone to above him either. And it's just this, you know, realization that in this industry, it is a really very much male dominated industry, and it still is even today. And kind of that thought process in your head, like, you know, am I overreacting to this? Is this okay? Can I leave this job? If I leave this, will I ruin my career for the rest of my life?
It's just basically disgusting, isn't it? So did he made a pass at you or touch you inappropriately?
Yeah,
or...
touched me inappropriately.
Right.
And straight away I said, don't touch me. And, you know, he played it off as, oh my gosh, I don't know what came over me. And then I was on the boat about to do a 5-hour boat trip thinking, have I overreacted to this whole situation? Like, am I being unreasonable? And then get home and find out he's done it to my housemate and the girl that was there before me and quit just before I left. When you realise that it's not a one-off accident, which even then it shouldn't have been okay, but when I realised the extent of the situation, I was like, I can't work for this person, and no one should put themselves through that in any kind of work scenario, any scenario whatsoever. Yeah,
it's such a horrible abuse of power, especially for young people. And like you say, you're getting the dream job, and you know that's, and you hear it so often with abuse that you start questioning yourself.
Yeah.
And that's when you know, and you did, which was great, that you need to just leave, and also call the police. And did anything happen? Did anything happen to this guy? Is he still running his business?
Still running the business, but for me, it was a big learning experience. And also, you know, I was proud of myself how I dealt with that. The fact that I did say something.
Yeah, it's great.
And the fact
and that's really hard in those moments because they have all the power.
Yeah, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is my job. I don't want to lose this job. Then what am I going to do? But I just kind of had that realization that there's always going to be something else. And the kind of person I am where, you know, I don't stop. This is like what I want and I will get it. Like, so after I left the boat, I then had to have a second operation because my feet were so infected.
Oh, God.
And then that week after was supposed to spend the week in bed, but went to Wild Screen for the week, hopping around on my crutches. Like, because I have that attitude as well where I'm like, this is what I want, so I'm going to take every opportunity.
Yeah.
Although I'd lost what I thought was the dream job, which it was, but it wasn't in that context. And I knew that I graduated, went there 3 days later, and some people can't find jobs for years after graduating. Sure. So I knew I didn't need it and that I could do something else.
Yeah, and it sounds to me like, you know, with these kind of experiences, and I mean, I've never had an experience like that. I'm sure a lot of that is to do with me being a man, but it sounds horrific. It sounds like you've also reacted to, you know, that's the thing with adversity, is like, how do you react to it? And, you know, reacting to it, and, you know, maybe there'll be other young people, well, I know there are a lot of young people that listen to this podcast who listen to this, and it's a really good lesson to learn and a good message to get across, that you can walk away. There will be other things, and you definitely don't need to be touched inappropriately at work.
No.
And it's also something that, and of course, I'm not saying that this field is full of, you know, inappropriate men touching young girls inappropriately, but it is a very male-dominated world. It's changing a bit, but you know, we talked about this a little bit earlier, and you know, I know you wanted to say a few things about that and talk about that moving forward. You know, getting opportunities, and you know, I just saw actually today that, you know, still Gary Lineker is the highest paid star at the BBC, and you know, they're still trying to reach these targets of getting women on equal pay, and it just seems to like take forever, all of this stuff.
Yeah, and you just think this has been happening for like so many years now. This has been going on, and we think we've progressed so much as a society, but then when you like start looking into all these different things, you realize actually things aren't quite as equal as they should be, given we're in 2019 now. And after going to that talk at Wild Screen, there was a talk at Wild Screen on women in wildlife.
Right.
And they started the talk saying the fact we're even having to do a talk on women in wildlife indicates that there's an issue here.
Yeah.
Like, this shouldn't even be a topic of conversation, that there is this minority and this inequality of the number of women working in the wildlife filmmaking industry.
And what was the message that came from that? Because I can imagine like looking through the program, and you've got, you know, so-and-so speaking about their expedition to National Geographic, and this other person talking about, it's just normal stuff. And then they've got, oh, women in wildlife. It's like a separate thing that we need to talk about. And what was the kind of message that came out of that for making a change?
I think it's just the realization that it's not going to change by itself. Like, you have to make these changes. You have to stand up for yourself if you're in a situation where you need to stand up for yourself. Like, be the kind of person that's willing to put yourself forward for things. Like, there was a study done where, you know, when a guy's asked, what do you do? And you say, I'm a photographer. A guy's much more likely in the study to say, I'm a professional photographer. And a woman's much more likely to play it down, say, I do a bit of photography. But switching your answers to be like, actually, I do this and I am good at this. And I could compete with anyone, no matter what their sex is, to do that same job just as well as they can. And if we're all going into stuff, working on our own mentality and own attitude to these situations, and just normalizing it with the way we behave and the way we respond to things, that's going to massively help in then changing other people's attitudes as well. But equally, like, speaking up when something's wrong, not necessarily in an inappropriately touching way, because that is not the norm.
That's quite extreme. yeah. But just generally, and I think, you know, this is a good time. Change is happening slowly, but I mean, just this week with the Women's World Cup, for example, I don't know what the viewing figures were for last night's semi-final, but apparently, you know, it's enormous. There's a real buzz around it. You know, there's good money in it. There's a lot of investment in it. You know, these are there are improvements, and I think you're right. It's so much of it are the semantics. It's like how you present yourself and the language that you choose to use. I think we could all do with a little bit of the kind of American in us, couldn't we? Us British, we tend to kind of underplay things a little bit. So no, it's really great to hear.
I think as well, like, supporting and celebrating each other as well.
Definitely.
Like, really being happy and proud of other people's success, and not having that thing which we all do of comparing your journey to someone else's. And having that just like negative mentality to things. Trying to switching that around kind of helps in all aspects.
And I think also, you know, men have a big responsibility as well to speak up. Because they're also currently, you know, the big decision makers and the main people in the field. So I think the more men speak up about these issues, it will help. So moving on. Oh yes, actually I wanted to talk to you about your studies, because you were studying the African wild dogs. And that sounded, I mean, that's kind of, you know, when you think of the dream job in zoology, or just working as a zoologist, it's like radio collars and, you know, antennas, and, you know, whenever you see that, you know, that's like, oh, that's what I want to do. So what were you doing with these wild dogs, and you know, what did you discover anything new about them you didn't know? And tell us a little bit about that experience.
It's funny because that was never actually what I was supposed to be studying. That was kind of from something going wrong and then last minute having to change it, which
sounds pretty exotic and exciting to me.
You always have to have this open mind to these things, because things do fall through, especially when working with animals. So my degree was actually a 4-year degree, because I did a study abroad year added on to it. So I went to Australia for a year. During that year, get sent this list of dissertations when I go back to Leeds for my final year. And they were all just stuff which didn't appeal to me, you know, working with fruit flies in the lab and birds and studying their feeding behaviour, all things which need to be studied.
Fruit fly is really important. But
not what I found like riveting to go and do a whole year's dissertation on. So I got in contact with Dr. William Hoppett whilst I was still in Australia and said, will you be my supervisor? Because normally it's based on grades and you get...
Can you tell us who he is? And
so he's a leader in animal behaviour research, has lots of published papers. He discovered lobtail feeding in humpbacks, forms of tool use in chimpanzees, just like this awesome guy that had done all this amazing work. And I came to him with this idea that I wanted to study wolves at the UK Wolf Conservation Centre and study learning in wolves. And he was like, yeah, totally happy to back you for that. So set up this study, had it all planned out, and then got back from Australia in July, just before starting my final year of uni. Was going to go to the wolves in August, and a couple of days before found out it's fallen through.
Oh.
And then I'm sat there thinking, now what? And phoned up Will, and he said, oh, well, I have a study you can do on birds. And I was like, well, I wanted to be studying carnivores.
Yeah,
I don't want to
course.
switch to birds. And then he's like, actually, I had master's students last year doing a project on African hunting dogs. It was a master's project, but you've come to me a year ahead. You're very much like, I want to do well this year. You could continue on from their work. So that's kind of how it all started and kind of came into place. So my studies were based at Yorkshire Wildlife Park. We did do a field trip as well, but for a different module, actually studying the landscape of fear. So my dissertation research was looking at social learning and pack dynamics in African wild dogs, and basically looking at one, I had a pack which had pups. Where in their development do they establish a hierarchy? Where in that time frame do they kind of form those social bonds that then live with that stay with them through their entire life? And secondly, based on that hierarchy and this pack interactions, does that influence their learning? So then you'd set them tasks and see, A, can they solve a task? And B, can they then socially learn how to solve a task? So by not having solved the task themselves, but just watching another one solve it, can they then learn to solve it by watching, which they can.
Amazing.
And see, does that spread through a pattern based on the hierarchy? Like, are they more likely to learn from ones that they'd spend more time with and have that closer bond with? And that was positive data as well. So it's now been shown in so many different species, with the whales, the chimps, now the dogs.
Amazing.
And that can be used in so many different ways that, they're one of the most endangered carnivores in the world.
Yes.
And so far there's been no successful reintroduction efforts because it's not working. Something's missing. So in that critical period in pup development, can you target that time in terms of pre-release training and use studies like this to help them in supporting their conservation?
That's amazing. So it really comes down, with reintroduction, which is obviously now such an important part of conservation, with so many species on the brink. All this information, you have to find this stuff out quickly.
Yeah.
And if that can be proven through good science and sound science, then there's a chance that. So I mean, this is something I know nothing about, but there's been no successful reintroductions of these dogs ever.
No.
Wow.
Not from the wild.
That's amazing.
There's been relocations.
Yes.
But even they're tricky, and there's very low success rate.
Yeah.
Because they have this such highly social nature that's so poorly understood. Like when people first studied the dogs, they thought there was no hierarchy whatsoever because it's so different to that of any other canid. Like they are very rarely aggressive. They're overtly submissive instead. And, the way people viewed them was just so wrong. And for Africa's most successful carnivore, more so than lions, hyenas, all these animals that we think of as being top predators, we know so little about them. And it's just, we were talking about this earlier, when if an elephant's endangered, everyone will back it because it's such a well-known animal. And it shouldn't have to be like that. It should be, we'll back anything that needs backing.
Yes.
We're here to save all species because we're really the ones that have caused the demise of most species.
I know, it's funny, isn't it? Like why a certain specific animal gets the backing and why one doesn't. And pandas are billions and billions and billions pumped into their conservation, and as far as I'm aware, they've made a really good recovery, and it's no surprise.
Yeah, and they're something that they look cute and everyone knows. They even had to change the common name of the dogs recently. So they used to be called African hunting dogs, and that was like, nope, don't call them, they're African painted wolves.
Yes.
Because it's...
Sounds better for PR.
Yeah, and they're not a dog or a wolf, really. They're not closely related to either of them. But it's just what works in people's minds and getting them to connect in a way which will get them to then back conservation.
Yeah, it's amazing. And that I just kind of sparked something in my mind about this, what makes us choose, the value of one animal over another, which kind of brings us nicely onto the fact that, you're another vegan wildlife photographer, and there aren't that many of us. Apologies for those who are listening that are. I just have never heard of you. Get in touch with me. But, I've interviewed Andy Parkinson and on this podcast. He's a great photographer, UK-based photographer, and a really a great speaker about veganism. And I know that's how you first learned about this podcast. So it's really nice for you to come on and talk about your experiences of being a vegan, why you went vegan, why you think it's important as a photographer, zoologist, presenter to be vegan. I'd love to hear, especially someone from the younger generation that's kind of growing up in this sea change that's happening right now, to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, as you said, it's kind of funny going on to that, because that's how I found, that's the first kind of interaction we had through social media, and actually the thing that completely changed my social media, because as you said, there are relatively few people in this industry that are vegan, and as someone using social media and trying to get into this industry from a basic level, I was almost scared to talk about things that might seem controversial or like I had too much of an opinion on things. So for the first kind of 8 months of using social media, I never put out that I was vegan. I never put out that I was into sustainability, any of that stuff. And then I listened to the podcast that you did with Andy Parkinson and raised the question as a discussion, can you call yourself a conservationist if you're not a vegan? And since then, that kind of gave me the confidence to be like, actually, this is my platform. I can make this personal, not in these are my views, you need to listen to this, or if you want to follow me, but the sense, this is my platform to share who I am as a person and what I believe in, and try and use that platform to achieve something more than just sharing my photographs, and trying to get people to change the way they were thinking or the way that they were living their lives. So going right back to kind of why I'm vegan, my mum brought us up vegetarian. So from a young age, I didn't know exactly why we were vegetarian when I was a kid, but I feel like it just puts you on this position where I always knew we don't eat animals because we love animals. So that's why we're not eating them. That's why mum says we don't eat them. And she was never like, you must be vegetarian your whole life. As soon as we are old enough to make a decision for ourselves, she was like, if you want to eat animals, you can do that. But we never wanted to. And we had a dad that's a carnist who eats animals, and a mum that was vegetarian. So we had that balance in our family. It was
Dinner
never...
times would have been interesting, right? So was your dad eating meat on his own? And
he is good, to be fair. Like when he eats vegan at home.
Sure.
If we're going out and stuff, that he's not there yet.
You'll stare at him at the dinner table with like these evil eyes. Poor dad.
But I think kind of growing up with that gave me a very unique perspective on things anyway. And I was always the weird one as a kid, because it until relatively recently, even now it's still uncommon, but until relatively recently it was so uncommon. And we'd go to people's houses as a child, and my mum would get questioned by the parents, what do you expect us to feed your kid coming here as a vegetarian? And I was like, well, she can eat most things, just not meat. And then going to university, and that was the first time where I kind of thought, it's not enough being vegetarian. Like, we've learnt about these 5 major mass extinction events throughout history. They didn't touch upon the fact that we're in the 6th and why we're in the 6th, but all these things kind of were not adding up in my head. And I felt like I personally would feel like a hypocrite if I wasn't doing all that I could in my life to support animals and how they were coping out in the wild. That's when I was like, you know what, I need to switch to being vegan, and not just vegan, but living more sustainably, like not just in terms of plastic, but palm oil and everything, not just buying into that over consumerism that we have as a society, and it really like switching my mindset. And I think I have kind of a unique perspective on it now, and it's really working for me in terms of, I don't want to put people off by being like, I'm vegan, you have to be vegan,
Sure.
you can't be in my life if you're not vegan. But just educating people, and you know, if you see a photograph that I post on my Instagram, you're like, oh, that's so cute, how can I help this animal? Then making people put that connection together and think, oh, actually, if I love an animal and I want to help the animal, how can I harm it? Kind of trying to get that realization out of people more, because I genuinely believe that if you love something, you can't hurt it. And I think that mindset, that's really kind of what I want to push from a place of love, not a place of anger.
Sure, I understand. And we've talked about this. I talked about this quite a bit with Jasper Goose and also Pete Cairns, that getting up on your soapbox generally doesn't really work. Sorry, Andy, if you're listening to this, but no, we need your approach as well. But wagging the finger, it just turns people off. And I think if you lead by example, like the things you say, and having a platform and informing, and because for me as well, it's turning vegan actually really opened up my mind. It also opened up my food vocabulary. I eat way more, much bigger variety of food than I did before I was vegan, for example. But there's so many resources out there as well. We were talking earlier about Colleen Patrick Goodrow, who is now a friend. I met her over New Year, and I must actually just plug her podcast quickly, because she did a really good job of plugging mine. But if you must listen to it, because it's great. She has two. One is called Animology, and it's really interesting. It's all talking about the language that we use around animals, which is a really important thing. Everything is kind of geared towards animals being this, you smell like a pig, you're dirty like a pig, and all, using animals, words like dog, etc., to describe people as derogatory terms. And
I've actually tried to do that a lot on my social media recently, really consciously word my captions. Like, say it's an animal that I photograph, like the cygnet, and I don't know the gender, never use it, he, she, or someone.
Right.
Just little things like, or humans and animals. We are animals.
Yes.
Like animals and non, like, do you know what I mean? Just trying to change the way I'm writing things, in those simple things, just changing my language choices to make it clearer, because that is a big problem.
It really is a big deal. And I know we've also both read Why We Love Dogs, Eat Pigs and Wear Cows by Melanie Joy, which is an amazing book for kind of when you're starting out with the journey of becoming vegan, is just being well informed, and her language and the way she processes or distills things that I feel instinctively, but she articulates them really, really well. And you're really able to speak about being a vegan without being a self-righteous, because that's also one of the problems of being vegan. Is the joke of like, how do you know if someone's vegan? They're going to tell you about it. And but yeah, just coming from a place of where you're confident, where you're really well informed, and but at the same time, I think it's, whilst you shouldn't wag the finger, it is important to kind of push gently, say, look, do you know what's going on? I think most people do know what's going on. It's just people don't want to change their habits. And I also understand that. In fact, I was at my local doctor yesterday, and he's not a vegan, but he was just like, without question, this is the healthiest diet. And he talked about the difficulty is, if you think about an older person who's been eating in a certain way for 40, 50 years, you have to be sensitive to that. You can't just say, you have to change your diet, tomorrow. So you're right, there really are ways of dealing with that. And I should just mention Colleen's other podcast, which is called Food for Thought. And that's much more about compassion and healthy living. So if people are interested, they should go and check that out.
I mean, that's the thing, like, it's not just about what you eat, and that's, I think, why it becomes people get on the defensive because it requires a lifestyle change. It requires change in habits that people have had if they have been eating meat for 40 years. Like, that's a lifetime of change that people then have to go through, not just in terms of what they're putting in their bodies, but mental change as well. And this is the norm currently in society. And we were talking about earlier how it's, people say, are you normal or are you vegan? Like, that is the word choices as well, like, because it doesn't have a term. Like, there's vegan, carnivore, like, these terms need to be used more, and the fact that there's no normal. The normal is vegan.
Of course.
We have the biology of vegans. It's not in our society to do that. But when you read that book, like the Melanie Joy one, and start picking up on things that you didn't even think of, like, people have this stereotype of vegans being pushy and pushing your thoughts onto people, but you'll sit and watch an advert on TV of a dripping beef burger. Is that not pushing that thought onto us? Like, these messages are there all the time from both sides. It's just we're not thinking that those messages there because it's what we're used to.
Yeah.
So for these changes to happen, it's going to require change as a whole society, which is going to take time. And like you said earlier, there's kind of trying to strike that balance between not wanting to be pushy, because I don't think it works. I know from myself, and kind of making that vegan transition myself, I was very much like, don't push this onto me. This is the decision I'm coming to for my own and in my own time. And then flipping that and thinking we are in ecological crisis, like we are losing species at an accelerated rate that we've never seen before.
Yeah.
Where do you get to the point where you're like, actually, that push needs to happen or it's going to be too late?
Yeah. And that's, you were talking earlier about this sort of holistic approach that you have to it. And I've seen lots of videos of you protesting in London with Extinction Rebellion. Can you tell us how you got involved in that, and the events and future events? Is it just simply by being online and a mailing list, or is it something that resonates with you, being out there on the streets demonstrating, making films as well?
Those are kind of like the first protests I ever went to, and I remember after the first one I was like, oh my god, that was so cool. That ability to kind of break these societal rules. And I didn't do anything bad, but sit on a street where you shouldn't be sitting, and
it's peaceful protest.
Yeah. And I actually got into it through my photography, kind of approached by someone through social media saying, you're a photographer, you're a wildlife photographer, how would you feel about photographing humans, because we're animals too? And I was like, yeah, I would love to. So I went along to run the Humans of Exile campaign, which is basically putting a name and story to these activists and kind of making people realize, these are normal people. They're not extremists. They're fighting for things that we should all be fighting for.
Sure, and they've probably got normal jobs like teachers and nurses and whatever.
Yeah. So it was the whole kind of experience with Extinction Rebellion. I mean, I don't support everything they do. Some things I haven't gone to and wouldn't go to, but the majority of what they do I'm in full support of. And it's been a weird experience of being incredible and feeling part, because, being someone that has these concerns about the environment and animals, you often feel like you're on your own in a sense, and you feel like, why is no one else seeing this? Why do I not have the backing from my friends and family? So going to this place where you're all fighting for something so important, it's like this lovely kind of community feel. But on the flip side of that, you kind of realize the messed up world we're living in. Like, one of the protests, there was a pregnant woman and she was protesting outside Oxford Circus. I was there as a photographer that day, and she had locked onto a lamppost or something, and she was being arrested. Police carrying this heavily pregnant woman, like she looked like she was gonna pop.
Wow.
And she shouts out, I'm doing this not for my child but for all our children. And that kind of like harrowing moment, and you're thinking, there's a woman here, a about to give birth by the looks of it, that's fighting for the future of us all, and she's getting arrested, and there's people out there that are rapists, murderers, thieves, and you're just like, how are we in this position as a society where we're even having to fight for there to be laws surrounding the environment? That shouldn't be something we have to fight for. We all need these things to survive. We all wouldn't be here without nature. You know, it's the air we breathe, the food we eat. It shouldn't be a case of there shouldn't even have to be protests for these sort of things. So it's kind of this weird situation where you're like, this is amazing and I'm surrounded by amazing people, versus, oh my gosh, this is weird and messed up that this is even happening.
It is. It's completely illogical, isn't it? And that's the worry, is when you stop and think about what's going on. It's, you know, there's so many similar threads coming through these conversations I have with photographers, with conservationists, that if you do think, you know, globally it's really depressing, but doing things like, and it's such a cliche, but it's so true, joining a protest, writing to your local MP, you know, getting involved locally. The more people that do that, you know, the more change will happen. I mean, look what's going on right now in Hong Kong, for example. It's incredible protests, and, you know, ultimately governments do have to listen if it continues. And I think what Extinction Rebellion are doing is great, because, you know, the moment you block a road in London, well, that's big news.
And I generally don't think there has been things that have come recently, like so many people are now declaring climate emergencies, and I don't think that would have happened if it wasn't for all these protests and Greta Thunberg starting the youth strike and stuff. I generally don't think all of this change in this time frame would have happened if it wasn't for the protests.
That's right. And then, you know, looking back again at the vegan movement, it's growing. Like, you know, when I went vegan in 2013, I never would have thought, you know, it would have gained such traction. You know, I live in Tottenham, just a few minutes from me now. It's, you know, on many ways it's sad, it's getting gentrified, but we've got, like, you know, our local cafes doing vegan fry-ups and soy lattes and stuff, and you think, God, it wasn't that long ago that there were riots here, and you know, it's a pretty poor area, but it's changing, and that's, you know, it can only be a good thing, and we have to hold on to that, really, don't we? I want to talk a bit more about you and you as a photographer, because, you know, you've graduated as a zoologist, but you've hit the ground running being a photographer and, you know, presenting your own videos. Roxy has a really great YouTube channel, which I encourage everyone to check out. We'll put all of the links and everything in the notes on your page so people can access that. But this, you know, you as a wanting to save animals, caring about the environment, what was it that made you wanted to go into the media side of things rather than the pure science side of things?
It's funny because saying I'm a photographer just sounds weird now.
There you go. So you're a woman who should be saying, yeah, I'm a professional photographer. You've been paid for work, so yeah, you absolutely are.
Yeah, and it's just never where I kind of saw my life going. A year ago, I would never have thought I was in the position that I am now. I started social media first because I just wanted a platform where I could show people all these amazing animals that I was seeing, and partly from a vegan perspective, partly from just a genuine, I want more people to get involved with conservation perspective. Like, look how cool this wildlife is that we have across the world. Like, let's all appreciate this and celebrate this more. But when I started, I had my phone and was just taking pictures on my phone. That's all I had. And then when I graduated, I was like, right, I'm going to get a camera. This is my first ever DSLR, like my first proper camera, as I always call it. And went in and just did it because I was going and seeing animals all the time and I enjoyed taking pictures of them. And then it became actually I really like taking pictures. And I feel like when you're out in the field with your camera, you kind of, because you want these shots, you kind of stay out longer. Like, you'll be out there for hours, and I kind of lose all concept of time. I always go into like this meditative state where I don't need a drink, I don't need food, I don't need the toilet. I'm like, how have I passed all these
Isn't it
hours?
amazing? I think that's such a great way of describing what photography is, because it's a very passive way, really, of engaging with nature. But it's a wonderful way, and very different than if you're just going on a walk. Because, like you say, you've got this almost this mission, like a hunter, to capture this animal on a camera and do it well, and then try and improve on that the next day. And that's so much about what good wildlife photography is about. Is just about going back and revisiting. And I'm the same as you. I find it completely meditative. And when you're looking through your viewfinder, time just can disappear. It's a really wonderful experience.
And I feel like it gave me more of an appreciation as well, because that moment where you're there photographing an animal, it's only because that animal's allowing you to be there. It could be gone in a second if it wanted to. It's kind of like that shared appreciation, like you both are aware that you're in each other's space, but you're both allowing the animals allowing you to be in their space, in their home. And it's kind of like that special moment that you've been accepted into their life, and when they keep going on, which they should do, otherwise you're disturbing wildlife, but when they keep going on with their normal behavior, you get to see things that you've never seen before in terms of an animal's behavior. It kind of really helped me further my appreciation for things on like a smaller scale, which I'd never thought of before, because you can see things with this massive zoom telephoto lens that you'd never see with your naked eye. And it just became such a love of mine. And then I think because I loved it so much and had this passion for it, I just kind of developed, like, putting so much time into it and practicing, learning more. And just last week, actually, I went back to Skomer Island and did a comparison on my Instagram of my wildlife photography from Skomer last year, which was one of my first ever trips with my camera to Skomer this year. And like I shocked myself at how different my photography was. And
this is with no formal training. It's just like going out there, doing it.
Practice and YouTube videos.
What would you do without YouTube?
Yeah, just practice, and you learn from your mistakes. You learn from the shots that you missed or were blurry, or you'll learn for the next time. And it just now is something that's my job. Like, I'm a photographer now, and that's in different forms, whether that be wildlife, human. I use it for product shots as well for my business, and it just becomes such a big part of my life, which if you asked me this time last year, are you a photographer, I would have said no.
Sure.
And now I'm like, yeah, I am.
That's amazing. But you're also really getting the most out of the camera, because you're making a lot of videos and you're also presenting a lot to camera. And I think I've read in the past that that's what you'd love to do also, is present films. Is that still kind of an ambition of yours, to be the next David Attenborough?
Yeah, so it was weird for me because presenting is kind of what I've always wanted to do, the wildlife presenting. But for me, I found it weird filming myself and being out there with,
you still have that self-consciousness.
Yeah, it's kind of, I'm talking to my camera. If anyone walks past, I'm going to look like a complete weirdo. So it took me a while to get to the stage where I made my first YouTube video. The first one I made was September. And it was of red squirrels in Scotland. Yeah. And yeah, it felt weird, but you just have to, like, I bought the mic, I bought the little gorilla pod that I could hold my camera out as far as possible with to film myself, like buying those things and being like, I'm going to make this, even if it's not very good, and I have to learn editing, and speaking to the camera is a whole different thing to being behind the camera. Even if, it was the first thing I did, I'm going to do it and I'm going to put it out there and keep doing it because it's what I want to do.
This is that tenaciousness you have from getting your feet infected. Like, you're definitely going to make wildlife films. And it's lovely because I've watched quite a few of these, and they're raw, which is great, but you can tell that you've just gone for it. And this is not loads of use of After Effects or slick smooth panning, slow motion, but they're really good stories, and that's the most important thing in that instance. And it's also amazing and brilliant that we have the capability and the possibility to do this. You don't need a big production company. You can go out with a small backpack and make your own films and inform people. And actually, that's brought me on to something I didn't know about, because I watched your one in the New Forest on the pigs. So, well, first of all, I encourage everyone who's listening to this to go onto Roxy's YouTube channel and check out the videos because they're great. But maybe you could tell a little bit about that story because that was also new to you when you went to film there, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just expected to go to the New Forest and make a nice, happy video about ponies and show everyone how fun it was being with the ponies. Kind of a big thing I'm trying to do with my videos is make people realize you don't have to be a professional to get out there. Just go out there and do it and just have fun. That's just all I'm trying to do with it, and just get practice because I do want to get into presenting and just have fun with it. So I just went there as a day trip to the New Forest, and as I was leaving I noticed some pigs in the forest, and I was thinking, why are there pigs in here? Like, that's not what I expected to see here.
And they were just roaming free.
Just roaming around, and as I got closer and to do some photography of the pigs, I noticed these staples in their noses. And I did a plug straight away on my Instagram stories, like, what is going on here? Why do these pigs have staples in their noses? Like, what am I looking at? And I have a lot of vegan activists that follow me, and it just came to light something I'd never even heard of before, which is pannage, which is where they use pigs in the forest for grazing, but they staple their noses so that they can't rummage through the forest floor because it will hurt them. The staples will pinch into their nose if they're doing this. So I kind of used that video to kind of show people I don't know everything. I wasn't going there to kind of expose the truth about the New Forest.
As an investigative journalist, yeah.
But I was like, if I don't know this, think how many people don't know this? And it's something that most people would probably be outraged to hear that this is being done. Like, how is that ethical and okay for us to treat animals like that, to stop them foraging in a natural way, causing them pain just when they're trying to look for food, a basic thing that every being on the planet needs is food. And yeah, that YouTube video wasn't as planned. It was obviously not as planned because a lot of it was filmed at home afterwards, after I had time to do the research into actually what was going on there. But I think that's why it's working, because I'm not trying to say I'm an expert, or I try to just keep all of my videos as very raw. Like, I'm just a normal person trying to learn about things and do good things that we can all be doing.
Yeah, and I think that's something we touched on a bit earlier, is that I think, especially with social media, people are seeing you and, oh, wow, Roxy's here, she's there, and she's making these videos, and it's a glamorous life, but underneath it is a lot of hard work. It takes time to drive to the New Forest, to present, to learn about sound, to learn about good editing and how to tell a story, and I think it's really important to let people know that a lot of hard work goes into this, and a lot of frustration of missing stuff or messing stuff up, and like you were saying earlier, learning from your mistakes. But I think a message from this is just advising people just to go out and do it. If you've got a good idea, you can go and do it.
Like, I started from nowhere. I had no photography experience, I had no filming experience, no presenting experience, but I was like, this is what I want to do, so I'm going to do it. And social media is hard work. It can be a full-time job for a lot of people. Like, creating content requires so much time. Like, even a photograph, it's not just that photograph, it's the trip you took to create that photograph, flicking through the hundreds of photographs that you took, editing that photograph, thinking of the caption. Like, for videos, it's the hours and hours of editing, and editing videos takes me a long time, maybe because I'm not very good at it, and hopefully it will get a bit quicker.
Better,
but
with that pig video, a really funny thing happened. So I watched it, and then I just went in to grab a cup of tea or whatever, and I came back, and YouTube just auto plays, and it had like suggested content. So the video after yours wasn't another video of yours. It had jumped to how to rear hogs for farming and for the best bacon possible, and I was just like, oh my god, they've got to sort their algorithms out. It was really... This
is the complete opposite of what she was trying to show in this video.
I'm not endorsing this at all.
Well, that was the other thing on Instagram the other day. This is a thing I want to touch upon, how there's this kind of lack of rules as such yet for social media. Someone shared a photo I took of a African wild dog and put it on a hunting Instagram page.
Yeah.
And I was like, for a start, they didn't ask me to use that photograph, which is a whole other issue.
Yeah.
They didn't tag me in that photograph, but also like if they had asked me, I would have said absolutely no way, you're not using my photograph to promote hunting, which is something I'm completely against in every aspect. And it kind of just goes down to this thing of, you know, being a photographer and or creating content online. This work is like so precious to you. It's your time, it's your investment, both like emotionally and time wise. And it seems like you have this easy, amazing life, but that's a lot of scheduling posts to create. So one trip can last for a month's worth of content, and, you know, thinking about how you're doing things and kind of trying to find ways of making people realize that it's not a glamorous life that we're living. We live normal lives, and these are the highlights of our lives that we're sharing.
Yeah, I know. And it's there aren't that many people, or a small percentage of people do, but most people want to talk about how amazing their life is and how cool they look, and so it's one of the things that drives me mad as well about social media, even though of course it is such a useful platform.
I think it's using it for good as well. There are so many things that I think are wrong with social media and different fields like beauty and fashion, and all this issue with young people having such bad mental health issues at the moment,
eating disorders,
and people being on their phones and being behind screens is part of that issue. We have this disconnect from nature as a society that's kind of not being instilled in us from a young age anymore. But social media can be used for good as well. Like some of the people I've connected with social media, some of them are my best friends, and I would never have them in my life if it wasn't for social media. It puts you in contact with these people that have the same interests, the same passions as you, and you have that as kind of your baseline from the start of your friendship and your interactions with that person. And if you're using it to spread positive messages about the way people can live their lives and change things, I think it's just, again, changing the mindset on social media and using it for positive things.
Definitely. I think it's a really good message. We're going to have to slowly start wrapping this up now.
Sure.
No, it's fine. It's just been great so far, and it's been I've really enjoyed just hearing you talk so passionately about all the different subjects that you're involved in. And one of them we haven't talked about there, and you reminded me when you talked about being really busy and all the hard work that goes in behind all your projects. And one of them is this, you did mention it a bit earlier, is you have an online retail business for products. So why don't you talk to us about that, and when did you start it? What do you sell? This is a good chance to plug it. We'll also put the links up on your page so people can find out about it. But yeah, tell us about it.
During my final year of uni, I kind of made this crazy rash decision. Came down, it was actually on New Year's Day, and I was writing out my resolutions for the year. Went downstairs and I said to my parents, I'm going to start a business. And they were like, what? You're doing your dissertation, you've got your final exam, why are you starting a
Ultimate
business?
procrastination. It's like you started cleaning the bathroom or organising your books in alphabetical order. No, you're going to start a business.
I'm starting a business, and I'm using my overdraft that you get when you're a student, and I'm investing all of my money I didn't have into this business. But it was something that I felt was emerging and something I was passionate about and aligned with everything else I was trying to do. So my web shop is a place, kind of like that one-stop place where you can go to get everything that's eco-friendly alternative to mainstream products. So it's called Zephyr Eco Market.
Okay.
The reason why I call it that is because Zephyr is a breeze that travels through the environment without causing any disturbance. So the leaves don't blow around everywhere when the breeze goes past. Everything's still and calm. And I believe that's how we should be living. We shouldn't be destroying everything on our path, taking and using things we don't need. We should be leaving no footprint on the earth and everything that's surrounding us. So it's kind of, a range of products that allows people to make changes in their life to reduce their harm.
What kind of products?
Everything from bamboo toothbrushes, coffee cups, to chopping boards made out of recycled plastic bottles,
awesome.
Yoga mats made from recycled cork, kind of a variety of different things, beauty products free from palm oil and animal products.
Yeah.
Other harmful things chemicals that we're putting in our skin and absorbing into our bodies that we don't think of. Just so the range of products kind of allows people to live in a less harmful way. But I also work with 2 charities as well. One of them is One Tree Planted, so they plant trees in forests of Borneo that have been destroyed by palm oil plantations, which is obviously a whole massive issue that we could get into.
It's another podcast worth, isn't it?
And the other is Painted Dog Conservation.
Oh, great.
Which is obviously so close to my heart.
And what happens to the proceeds of the sales go to these? Is that how you support them?
Yeah, so proceeds, and I sell some. They have a place called the Iyengar Arts Centre where they employ local people out in Zimbabwe, and they take snares out of the wild, which snares aren't specific to animals. Anything that goes through them will be caught and killed. So they employ local people to go out and remove these snares and then transform them into artwork.
Wow.
So it's teaching local people that, you can earn money from the wildlife that's here without harming them.
Yeah. And
building on that human-animal relationship, because if we don't work on the human aspect, conservation's not going to work.
No.
Which is why, I love what they're doing, because it's kind of targeting the root cause of the issue, really, which is the human aspect of why this species is going extinct.
Amazing. And so how do you find time for it all? Because one thing we haven't talked about is also your other job with ZSL. You're presenting at Whipsnade, you're making all these videos, you're also now writing on a blog. And maybe you could talk a bit about that as well.
Yeah, so Whipsnade, I'm there now 3 days a week working as a presenter, which is really rewarding, especially in terms of kids that come up to me afterwards and say, I want to do what you do, how do I do that? And
that's great.
That inspiring the younger generation, which are the people that are going to be out in the field one day, the people that we need to inspire to kind of get involved with conservation.
Yeah, because these get a lot of criticism, from the vegan police. But that was going to London Zoo as a kid was hugely inspiring for me. And of course, they're not all brilliant, but they still play an important role in conservation. Yeah,
and ZSL, which is the charity that runs Whipsnade where I am, it works in over 50 countries across the world. And
wow.
They even talked about it in Our Planet, the Przewalski's horses. At the turn of the century, there were 12 left in the wild, and if it wasn't for captive breeding, they'd be extinct.
Yeah.
There's now 1,000 back in the wild. And, kind of getting people to realise there are these amazing things that captive environments are doing, but it's what is the captive environment that you're supporting, because they're not all the same. So I'm there 3 days a week, kind of doing that thing, fitting in my business and running my business. I do it all entirely on my own. I have my stock room at home, process orders on my own, emails, everything. Just kind of.
So you're a master at where to buy your packaging and packing tape and all the boring stuff that goes in the back end of running a web business.
Yeah, and kind of learnt the hard way, learnt by my mistakes again, and just learning as I go. And I have very supportive parents as well that have been like, you need help packaging up your orders? We'll sit there doing it together.
They're very useful parents, aren't they, in those situations? And then you're doing this blog as well.
Yeah, so that's the most kind of recent form of income for me. A guy called The Points Guy, which runs a business based on collecting air miles and using those to travel. An audience of 10 million people that fly regularly and aren't going to stop flying. So when they launched their UK branch, they got questioned understandably a lot about, given the circumstance we're in and the environmental situation we're in, how do you feel about this? So they then were like, we need to have a sustainability aspect, which is kind of where I came in and started writing about traveling more sustainably, traveling as a vegan, kind of these kind of things where at first I was torn of whether to do it, whether that aligned with what I was talking about and doing other aspects of my life. But, these are 10 million people that fly regularly and aren't going to stop flying. And there's all so much I can do on my Instagram to people that have these interests already. But actually, these are people that don't have these interests.
Sure.
So just planting those seeds here and there could actually be more powerful.
Coming out of the bubble.
Yeah. If they start offsetting with a company that offsets properly, or if they decide to fly in economy instead of first class and reduce their carbon emission for that flight by 10 times, making these changes which they might not have even thought of could make a massive difference.
Yeah, because that's the thing.
Run.
Yeah, we the world we live in is it's the modern world, and big business can play a hugely and does play a hugely important role, kind of ironically, in conservation. So you have to work with it.
And I think I'm a big advocate for like small changes do make a difference. Everyone doesn't have to, throw everything out their house today. Never use any form of plastic again. Never do this again. Never do this again. Everyone's got to start somewhere. None of us are perfect now. Like, we weren't vegan our whole lives. I've not been sustainable my whole life. Everyone starts somewhere, and if people make changes, no matter how small, it's still better than doing nothing.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So, what are your hopes, wishes, and dreams for the future?
Hard question. Especially now, because I feel like I'm in a place in my life where I'm accepting everything as it comes, and I don't feel like I have to necessarily be a photographer, a presenter, I don't have to have this label. I do a bit of everything. I'm a zoologist, I'm an animal and climate activist, and if that encompasses everything, then so be it. All I know is that I want to be out there teaching people about conservation, promoting animal and climate activism, and inspiring people to get out there and do the same. So in terms of like a future goal, that's where I want to go, and the path that I'll take that might not be the path that I necessarily expected, but as long as I'm achieving that, I'll be happy.
That is a brilliant answer, Roxy. Thank you so much. It's been so great talking to you, and there's so much more I want to talk to you about.
Thank you for having me, though.
It's a real pleasure. So we'll get you back on. Again, we'll put a full set of links in the notes, and we'll keep following you on your journey. Definitely follow Roxy on Instagram if you're listening. I don't know, I'm not super active on Facebook. I don't know if you are, but I mean...
Not super. I try to do Facebook, but bit much doing everything, isn't it? Pick and choose.
But we'll keep the conversation going and get you back on in the future. Thanks so much for coming along.
Thank you for having me. It's been amazing.
What a pleasure and a joy talking to Roxy. I really enjoyed listening to her measured approach to all the areas she is working in, and it's the common thread when talking with all my guests is looking at just how hard they all work, and Roxy is no exception. Which is why I'm really looking forward to seeing so much more of her work in the future. So there are plenty of links on her page in the podcast section of my website, so you can check out what Roxy is up to, and be sure to click on the link for her online store, the Zephyr Eco Market, where you can buy a whole range of environmentally friendly products. Is it too early to mention Christmas? Of course not. You can also share this very podcast with your community. It is free. They are all completely free. So please leave a review on iTunes. It helps us to reach a wider audience and hopefully to connect with people who don't necessarily put wildlife, conservation, and the environment at the forefront of their minds. So there's nothing wrong with a gentle nudge, right? If you don't already, you can follow me at Matt Moran Photo on my Twitter and Instagram handles, and on Facebook it's /Matthew Moran Photography. You can keep up to date with behind the scenes work on my blog. There's videos, I'm updating my galleries, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Thanks again for listening. It's much appreciated. We'll see you next time.